comics?
Because they have no home.
And we're back. The craziness
Yes.
continues.
And I am still Joe Getcho.
Wait, no. I'm Joe Getcho.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think that's probably a good place to start talking about the Disney Plus show. There's only one episode out as the time of this recording, but that's probably the biggest difference between the two, where the comic book, I feel like most of the comedy there is, it's more of like that dark humor like you would find in Hellboy or something like that, where it's a little more implied by something visual, or he may, have a line where the guy goes, we can see you coming, and he goes, that's the part I like, or something like that. But it's a little bit broader comedy in the show, which I think I haven't decided if I like that or not yet, because I've only seen one episode. I think that that's something that Marvel does in general a lot. So it would have been cool for them to have like a purely dramatic angle on this character, but at the same time, Oscar Isaac, I think, sells it really well, and so he's entertaining to watch for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, and like you said, this being the first episode,
Mhm.
our opinions on this are going to be very skewed because they're going to do stuff later that may change how we view this first episode and what they've given us so far.
True.
Because we primarily see Stephen Grant, and we don't really see Mark Spector except in the reflections and when Stephen Grant is blanking out. So we haven't got enough of him to really see sort of how they haven't really interacted, I guess, up until this point. But obviously, Spector's aware of Grant, and then we don't know if other personalities are going to emerge there as well, whether it's ones we've seen in the comics or if they make something completely new. I mean, we might have like a glass split situation on our hands with, how many did you have? Was it like 20, 30, 60 personalities?
Oh, I don't know. It was a lot. Those are good movies, by the way, too.
Oh, man. James McAvoy, what an actor, though.
He's so good.
Wow.
He's so good, man. Yeah. I don't understand why that last movie got really bad reviews. I thought it was really good.
It was.
So
yeah.
I don't really understand where all the negative press came in there. But yeah, so Moon Knight, the show, it's interesting. This is going to be a little more difficult for us to talk about, I think, because we've only seen 1/6 of it so far, because we're actually so current. So unlike most things where we seem to be kind of trailing behind, I think we've caught up to what media is doing right now. And we don't really have the full picture of the show, which with this one, I think is going to matter a lot, because that aspect we were talking about in the comic books of not really being sure how much of it is real and how much is not, I feel like that's probably going to be a pretty major component of the show as well.
Yeah, especially when you're seeing things from Stephen Grant's perspective, where he doesn't know what's real because, he's chaining himself to his bed. He's pouring the sand around it to keep him to stay there, while he tries to sleep. And he even tries to keep himself awake so that way he won't wander off in the middle of the night. So definitely looking at it from his perspective, things are very crazy. But I think from Mark's perspective, it's going to be a lot, it's going to make more sense. Like maybe he's more accepting of the crazy, whereas Steven's going to be the one that's going to like freak out.
It's kind of like business as usual for Mark. You get the impression of, that is something that they do really well on the show, is communicate how disorienting it would be to suddenly just wake up somewhere and have no idea how you got there, and have blood on your hands, and there's guys shooting guns at you, and you have no clue why any of it's going on. And so it is fun as an audience member to be brought along in that confusion. It's interesting. I was thinking about this last night after I watched it, because I don't like being so much of an active participant in the action, like in the Batman, like in that car chase scene. But as far as getting into the character's psychology, I do enjoy them using a device like that in this show. So I'm not sure why I like one and not the other.
I think the way it enhances it for you, maybe, because like the idea of the shaky cam in the car scene is it's supposed to enhance the chaotic action, but in this it's like it's to enhance the chaotic action of what's going on with his mind. So it's more of a mental
Right.
thing, and like the lights going out and the blurring and all that stuff like really help enhance your sense of something weird is going on and how the character feels. And maybe I don't know if that's like a personality thing of maybe just you're more empathic and so that's why you relate to that more, or if it's just the way
Yeah, I
that
don't
it's
know.
portrayed. But
I don't know. It's just the only thing that bothered me in the Batman really was that just generally the visual style of it, and I just still can't quite get over the way it was shot.
yeah,
And this Moon Knight was much more traditionally shot. And it I guess it just felt like the jump cuts and stuff like that was more justified with them giving him the different personalities and stuff like that. And it was cool that we stay with one perspective, I think, for the whole episode. I thought that was neat because that's really, I mean, it's a 6 episode show. So it's kind of interesting to me. It may be structured similarly to the comic book that we just read, where it's like we could have each episode focus on like a different facet or something. And then maybe you can have one that focuses on the villain's perspective or something like that. But I think it would be really easy to do that and then tie it all together at the end. And I'm kind of, if that's where they're going with it, like I'm psyched for it. Uh I don't know. It was one of those things where I watched it and I was just like, this is like all pretty cool. Like I'm enjoying it. I'm having a good time. I don't have any really major gripes about any of it. The performances were good. The music was good. I really like that they showed Khonshu, actually, that they showed him like walking,
yeah,
which
that was
incredibly
awesome.
creepy. It was so creepy, but it was so awesome. And I mean, it's like I love that we read the story that we just read because it was like he just stepped right out of the comic book. That was
Mhm.
so cool. Yeah, so I was really glad that they were playing up the supernatural element because I think that was the stuff that really worked in the comic.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of character appearances and references just in this first episode alone. Like we start off with Arthur Harrow putting glass in his shoes. So
Yeah, what's the deal with that?
so in the comic books, he's actually a doctor, and and this is going to sound very familiar, has an ailment that he's trying to cure by any means necessary. Sound familiar to Morbius.
Okay.
So I wonder, we don't know if he's a doctor in this or not. Maybe he was and he gave that up, and that's why he's, out here doing his thing. But essentially, he has that disease where, or not disease, but he has that condition where he can't really feel pain.
Oh,
So,
okay. So is that what they were showing in the first
yeah. So
scene?
but it's weird because like he can't really feel pain, but the reason is because he has this incurable disease, or not disease but condition, that's causing him constant agony. So he understands what they call pain
Weird.
theory, so how to block out that neural response.
Oh, I
So
see.
his solution eventually just ends up being like, okay, I'm just going to block this out and block out all pain and all of this. And so he kind of does that. I don't know, like if he, it's just an obsession, or if he's doing that to feel something, or why he walks around with it in his shoes. This was a character that was introduced in, I had to look this up, 1985 in Moon Knight #2.
Okay.
So
So he's pretty early on then.
yeah,
Moon Knight, it's interesting you said he came about in the Bronze Age. I usually think of the Bronze Age as like the 70s for the most part, which I know the 80s can be part of them can be kind of lumped in there. But there's sort of a shift in the 80s towards the darker, edgier type stuff that we would then be calling the Dark Age in the 90s. So
hmm
that's sort of like a weird intermediary period. But I feel like this character came about at a really interesting time where it was like halfway between the sort of over the top shenanigans of like Silver Age 1960s comics and halfway between the more serious stuff that would be done in the 80s, like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and stuff like that. So he's, in a way, the split personality thing is really cool because it's almost like indicative of the time he was created in. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like there's a little bit of old and a little bit of new in there, and it's in a way it's almost like confused about what is the character, but at the same time that's kind of what makes him unique, is that you don't really know what you're going to get from one moment to the next. So yeah, I
Right.
thought they did a really great job with showing that in the show. And then of course, the reveal of the costume at the end. What did you okay, before I comment on it, what did you think of the outfit at the end?
So it's interesting because they really tried to go like I don't know, make him like a mummy with all the bandages and how
Yeah,
it kind of grew out of him. I don't know, like
he looks like Ragman, like
yeah.
DC's
Yeah,
Ragman.
that's it. I
Uh-huh.
I thought that without thinking it. But when
Yeah.
you said it, I realized I thought it. Like yeah, like
Yeah.
obviously, bright, well, not even bright white though. It's like kind of a grayish color.
Yeah.
And then having the face, like I kind of get that they can't keep his entire face in the hood shrouded because that might be too difficult or impractical. But at least they got the eyes. It's not like a person looking
Mhm.
at you. It's these like glowing eyes that are freaky. And I
Right.
think that was a really that's almost one of his more prominent features. I think besides the like moon or half moon logo is
Yeah.
those eyes staring at you, just like you can't, they don't look human, you can't see in them, just kind of piercing you when they come at you. So
I liked the look of it generally, but the mummy thing was weird. And that, again, that like Ragman comparison from DC
yeah.
is sort of what immediately came to mind. He wouldn't have been on my radar as much, except that they did do a live action version of him on Arrow. So he actually appeared on that show. And
Ragman.
then yeah,
Yeah.
he's actually had his own comic a few times at DC as well. So it was weird to see that sort of like mummification thing. And I get that they're going for like the Egyptian motif. Oddly, what I couldn't stop thinking about was the like the 1999 or whatever year it was Spawn movie, where his cape was like alive and it was like animated by CGI, and it was kind of, it was like early CGI. It just really reminded me of the look of that for some reason, which is, I guess, good and bad. Like that looked really cool at the time, but I don't know. With it being Disney, I wished it was a little bit better animated. I
Yeah.
don't know if I don't know if that was a gripe that you had or not, but I looked at it and I thought, man, they have done it a little bit more convincing. I don't know.
Well,
Maybe it's TV, so they don't have the movie budget. I don't know.
I don't know. We do get like a glimpse of it, but we don't really see it, I think, fully in
Yeah,
action.
that's true.
So maybe, this is just sort of the teaser, but they
Hmm.
also, there is a shot of him as Mr. Knight out there on the internet, and
Oh,
that does look
nice.
cool. So,
That'll be great. I mean, honestly, I would rather see a guy in a suit than them just have it be 100% CG at this point. And that's
yeah.
funny because I used to be like, oh man, CGI is the future. Like that's how we're gonna see all these special effects now. But I think there's a place for practical and CG, and I think the best way to do it is to have as much as you can put on screen actually be there, and then the rest can be animated around it.
Yeah. Instead of
So
like
I
those
don't.
gray suits with the little checkers on them, and it's like the
Yeah,
entire thing is just completely fabricated by computer generation. Like it's definitely evolved a long way, but at the same time, like it seems like they also cut corners there sometimes, hoping we won't notice, but they
yeah,
do.
just like it's easier to do it that way than to actually build something or make something.
Hmm.
So I mean, there are instances where things were CG that I had no idea. Like apparently the entire um fight in Washington in Justice League, like none of the backgrounds are there. for like that entire fight with Superman. Where like right
Yeah,
after they resurrect him, like I guess that's all CG,
it's all
which I had
only.
no idea that that entire, the memorial or whatever it is around them was all fake. But I think when they try and do it with people and real animals and stuff like that, it's easy for your eye to recognize that you're not looking at something real. And I think one place that like Ghostbusters Afterlife really succeeded was, yes, we're gonna have CG Stay Puft Marshmallow Men, but they bring those like demon dogs back from the first movie. And while they were claymation in the first movie with a mix of like animatronic, they did actual animatronic dogs in this movie, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can tell it's there. And it just, your eye knows the difference
Mhm.
somehow, and it's just, I don't know,
The
it's more
Mandalorian.
satisfying when you can tell it's physically there.
The Mandalorian, another Disney show now with Star Wars
Oh
being under
yeah.
them, but they do that too, where it's all the practical, like more like the puppets you would see in the original Star Wars, but it doesn't look hokey and their movements aren't, robotic, but it just, I don't know if it's the nostalgia where it's like, oh yeah, this is what I grew up seeing, so I'm really happy to see it, or if it's just like this just looks more real to me because you can at least, there's more substance to it. It doesn't look sort of rubbery and shiny like a computer image
Right.
would. And I think, yeah, that's where they get the best work is when they combine practical and then sort of enhance it with computer graphics rather than doing 100%, simulated. Like the backgrounds seem to work out pretty well when they put the characters on top of, somewhere like you mentioned Justice League. Like I think, you didn't notice that it was the whole thing was green screen. Neither did I.
Right.
And they do a lot of that where they'll have like a building, and then the scenery is all CG, and I think that works really well. But it's the characters that are 100% that they just look like cartoons, like it's Space Jam all
Yeah.
over again.
Oh yeah. Space Jam. I need, you know what? Um, Several people, well, not several people. My little sister has told me that I need to watch the new Space Jam, that it was actually good. But every time I watch that trailer and I see that they like CGI animated Bugs Bunny, I'm like, it's just, Bugs Bunny is supposed to be drawn with a pencil, man. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's me getting old, that I just can't get over that. Because, but I like computer animated movies. It's just for some reason that one I'm like, but these are like the Looney Tunes, man. They're supposed to be drawn. I don't know. It's
I don't know.
it's funny. It's funny that I can't get over that in a movie that's about real NBA basketball players playing basketball with cartoons. But there you go.
South Park warned me to stay away from that movie, so I haven't seen it either.
Oh, did it? Well, if South Park told you not to watch it, then you can't.
Yeah.
Um,
But
back
anyway,
to Moon Knight. I guess I wanted to talk about the effects a little bit more, which I realize we've already probably talked about this too much, but they did have that sort of Egyptian dog. I don't know if it was actually a Saluki or whatever, but that sort of Egyptian dog thing that was chasing him. And I thought it was okay that that was CGI. I was fine with that because I was like, well, I don't know how else you're gonna have it charging through the museum and doing all that
yeah,
stuff.
moving that fast.
It also had a kind of odd look to it where it was almost like made of energy or something like that. I don't know.
Wasn't it
It,
like an
it
Anubis or something?
yeah, something like that. It was pretty unique looking. So that was cool. I did want to ask you about the villain that Ethan Hawke plays though. Harrow. What's the deal with his tattoo comes to life and decides if people are guilty or innocent or something? Does any of that have any basis in comics, or is that just like an idea they came up with for the show?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely not an expert in Moon Knight for sure, but that's not something that I've seen or that triggered anything like remembering for me. So it might be something that's unique to the show because, Harrow is being shown in a different way, and I don't know if it's because that's how they decided to use him or if they on purpose tried to not make him like another Morbius where it's like, oh, we have a doctor and he's trying to cure a condition, and
Yeah.
or make it like Glass where it's like he has this thing going on. with the neural pain response. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where it goes because it seems like it's going to be a fight between gods almost. It's like
Yeah.
he's sided with one and Moon Knight sided with
It's
another,
like
and so they're
Amit or Amit or
yeah
something like
Amit.
that.
They're going
Yeah.
to have to clash at some point, and it won't be just the two characters fighting, but it'll be the bird skull and the what does Amit look like? I don't think we saw him in this.
No, we didn't see him. I think that works though, honestly, because like I said in the comic review, the elements that really made him feel unique are the personality split and then him tackling these supernatural elements. And I think that's a really good place to position that superhero, especially because unlike DC, I think Marvel has a lack of characters that address those kind of threats. I think you've got Doctor Strange, and he's really the big one when it comes to like, oh, there's a supernatural problem. Let's call Doctor Strange. Whereas, DC's got the whole Justice League Dark, so they've got a ton of characters that are involved with that. They've got Deadman, Zatanna, John Constantine, Black Orchid. I mean, the list goes like on and on. There's Etrigan, the Demon, Black Alice. There. I mean, I could list a whole bunch of Magic characters at DC. So I think it's cool for Marvel to do more with that because it feels like, at least when you compare it to the other big comic company, like they don't have as many superheroes that are taking care of that type of thing. And you would think you would need them. So I don't know, because like Doctor Strange can't do it all himself, I would think.
No, but at the same time, Moon Knight is not really somebody you would want to call for anything because
That's kind of a good point.
I mean the body trail alone would be
That's true. He does kill people. So I have a question that's kind of related to that about the show, and I want to know what you think. So it made us upgrade the Disney Plus subscription to be able to view TVMA content in order to watch this. My first question is, did this feel like a TVMA show? And my second question is, do you think that they need to take it there to match the tone of the comic, or do you think it's okay to keep it PG-13?
I think this is a really big tipping point because right before this we got the Defenders, Daredevil, uh, Punisher, everybody on Disney Plus right before this, and that's where the parental controls came in. And then here comes Moon Knight, sort of adding to that collection of more of the like nighttime superheroes that these aren't necessarily for kids. These are they're more adult. They're not like full on TVMA where you've got like nudity and violence just left and right constantly. I mean, this is only the first episode, so I guess anything could happen, but I doubt it's going to go, quite
Yeah.
that crazy. But at the same time, like they kind of do need to show him be either violent or do some killing or something because I think that would detract from the character too much. But at the same time, I don't think that we need a bloodbath spectacle to sell that either. But it's gonna have to be there because again, he's in it's gray in the show, but he's in a bright white costume and he gets blood on him and it's very easy to see. So we're gonna have some of that content that would be more TVMA. So I really hope, I guess, that they're going to push the envelope with it, but they're not going to just like overdo it their first time out of the gate with making it like really bloody. I mean, Daredevil was bloody, so
Yeah, Daredevil was pretty violent.
so this
But
would
I
need to be
don't
a
I
step
don't think
above.
that any of it in Daredevil felt forced. I feel like it was mostly justified by the story. Particularly when they're showing Wilson Fisk's backstory. I think all of that violence and that sort of shock value is really just a part of who that person is. So it definitely needed to be there. If anything, I feel like when we saw Wilson Fisk again in a TV 14 setting on Hawkeye, he didn't seem like as big of a threat as he was for 3 seasons of Daredevil.
Right.
So that was a place where I feel like the rating hampered them a little bit, maybe. That said, just from one episode of Moon Knight, and again, it's probably going to change as we go deeper into the show, but just from one episode, I don't think they earned a TVMA rating at all. Like, I think this was perfectly fine for a TV 14
You have
audience.
those darker concepts of him, like he's not really struggling with personalities, he's more just kind of struggling with, it seems like it's mental illness at first, where he's
Yeah.
disappearing while he's sleeping, there's something going on, he's having these, kind of weird moments and things like that. So maybe it's like those more adult concepts, but at the same time I think those would just go over a kid's head, so it wouldn't really
Sort of
be
like how The Matrix got
disturbing.
an R rating just for how disturbing the concept was, even though they didn't have enough like swearing or violence in it to make it R.
Yeah, that's
Um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't want to see them go overboard with it either. I certainly don't think it needs to go to the levels of excess of Peacemaker, whereas
oh
Peacemaker
yeah.
was like all about excess, and I mean, so was the Suicide Squad. So it was very much just continuing that tone from that movie. But with this, I think it does give them the freedom to show that he's a little bit more violent character. But I would agree with you that I don't need it to turn into him just killing rooms full of bad guys. I feel like that's more the Punisher. And I think you could make the argument that the Punisher, he's definitely not a hero. If anything, he's an anti-hero. But you could maybe make the argument that he's not even an anti-hero with how high his body count gets and how not very discerning he is of who he takes out sometimes. Whereas Moon Knight, I think, is firmly in that he's an anti-hero. Uh,
Yeah.
Setting. Maybe I view him differently because I've only read that recent series by Ellis, and because he actually suits up as a superhero, whereas the Punisher doesn't do that. I don't know, but
Well, it's
yeah,
also difference in motivation,
yeah,
whereas, Punishers is more like personal and Moon Knight's is more, I have this crazy deity talking to me and guiding my actions and fueling my abilities. So,
yeah. So I have a question about that too, actually, and maybe you can answer it with. I mean, I know you're not an expert, but you've got more comic familiarity than me. Is he kind of at Khonshu's mercy?
oh,
I mean, is
definitely.
Khonshu basically guiding his hand the whole way when he's doing his? Is it like the helm of Nabu that Doctor Fate wears, like where it just possesses him? I guess.
Well, and that's sort of, I guess, another reality question of, is he even seeing this Egyptian god, or is this just another part of his, or one of his different personalities?
Okay.
And I mean, and that's been something in the comics. It's funny because, like, the writer, depending on the direction that they take it, and then also the characters of what they think, because at first they think he's crazy because he made all this Egyptian stuff up. And
Right.
at one point or early on, he didn't even have that as necessarily a power. It was a question of whether that was something that was true or not. So, like, if you have any familiarity with Moon Knight or just things that you've heard or seen, and you're confused about what his true, I guess, origin or nature are, that's why. Because, again, different writers, but then also it's questioned within the stories itself. So it leaves you with confusion whether you read them or not, which is definitely fun. But getting back to this, I don't really remember instances of them like clashing or arguing with Khonshu and saying no, I won't do that, or something. And that's sort of
Okay.
that, like they say in the comic that we read with the psychic connection. It's like he's really, Khonshu's like fueling him, and he might be a part of his personalities. He might not be, but they're more, I don't want to use symbiotic because that implies something else, but it
Yeah, but they're working
they're
together. They're
working
like
together.
co-conspirators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
uh,
Wait, you said there were several cameos in it of
yeah.
other characters.
So there are some supporting characters, that I talked about at the beginning of our episode that were not in the issues that we read of the comic, but they did drop, like, do some name drops or some hints, or had a character that they didn't name. So the first one I want to go over because I mentioned it at the beginning of the episode and said you have to stay tuned for the after show to find out. And I did that because it's really not. It could be a big deal, but it's probably not. But it's another one of those like rumor things. Somebody saw something and it's like, oh, it means something, and it
It's
probably
Mephisto.
well, not this time, but yes, like that. Uh, so there's a point when Stephen is running for the bus, and there's a shop in London called Atlantis. And
Okay.
so we've actually had this. I did look this up. We've had this teased in Iron Man 2 on the Shield map, and actually in Avengers Endgame talking about underground earthquakes. So Namor is one that I think people want to see, but we really haven't had any connections, or there's not anything on the books right now. But,
Right.
because it says Atlantis, maybe that's something that's loosely connected, and they're dropping us breadcrumbs to find out that, maybe he'll be in Wakanda forever, or, one of the upcoming movies, or he'll have a title, or who knows. But
I would rather see him in Fantastic Four,
yeah.
honestly. He's definitely an important supporting character in Fantastic Four. So I mean, not that shows up in a lot of issues, but I would very much be excited to. I mean, his sort of reintroduction or his introduction to the Marvel Universe at large was Johnny Storm finding this homeless guy and like burning his beard off to reveal that he was actually Namor, who
Wow.
fought in World War II alongside Captain America and the original android Human Torch. So this is a character that Stan Lee didn't create. He was from the 40s, like Cap was, like the original Human Torch, who was not Johnny, was. And Stan just kind of brought him out of mothballs and made him a supporting character in FF. So it would be cool for them to do something like that. That's where I would like to see him show up.
Didn't he
I
also have the hots for Sue Storm?
Yeah, so that's another thing, is like he basically he describes her as glorious and thinks she's like the most amazing woman on the planet. And so there's always this like romantic tension between Reed and Namor, where Reed and Namor cannot stand each other. Um in the early issues in the 60s, it was kind of played up where Sue would kind of go like, "Oh, he is a pretty dreamy guy, though," and Reed would be like, "What are you talking about?" And but later on, they would kind of move away from that angle of having her be like, "Maybe I'll cheat on you, though." They would kind of let that plot point go as they moved on, and they're Reed and Sue are pretty well committed to each other, but there is almost this respect that Sue and Namor have for each other, where she can basically ask Atlantis for a favor if the FF needs something, and if she's the one coming to him, then he'll probably do it. So there's that angle as well. And he's also a cool character just because people like to describe him as Marvel's Aquaman, but he's really very different because he is very much an anti-hero as well. He is much more at odds with the other characters in the Marvel universe than Aquaman is with the other characters in the DC universe. So sometimes he's a villain, sometimes he's a hero. You don't really know where he's going to fall. I'm not really that interested to see Wakanda have a war against Atlantis. I don't know. That just seems like
Yeah.
not that interesting of a story idea. But if they can work him into the Fantastic Four, I think that would be cool, and then maybe spin him off into his own thing.
Yeah, I really think that we're almost building up to the unveiling of the Fantastic Four in the MCU,
It
because
really feels that way.
they're like the first Marvel family. Like they're so important in comics, and yet they're completely absent from the MCU. And I mean, it makes
Mhm.
sense. Like there's not really any point that they could have really injected them that would do them justice. But I feel like by holding off on revealing them, we're sort of making the hype more so that when they actually do premiere, it's going to break the internet. And
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope it does have that shock value to it, because if they just sort of like, hey, here's the FF movie, because that's what they did before, is like, here's an FF movie, and you're like,
Right.
okay, all right, and then we move on. But like this needs to be, and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, I think is gonna it. Well, it is gonna break reality for
The
sure.
rumor mill for that movie
Oh
is so
man,
out of control.
I
I
that would be such a great place to drop the FF though, especially
it would.
because there's a certain character, and I won't spoil this if you're like me and you try to avoid the trailers, but there's a certain character that you hear their voice, but you don't see them. But
Yeah, I've already had it spoiled,
yeah,
and I wish I didn't. I
so
wish I did. Let's not talk about it here,
no. So
just in case.
if you're familiar with his voice, you'll know who it is. But anyway, that sort of leads to, because it looks like there's some sort of council. And so if there's a council, there could be
Yeah, there's a
Richard.
certain person that should be on that council.
Yeah, so that could be another where the FF are, and maybe they're hiding on purpose. I don't know. That's a whole nother conversation I think that we could get into that doesn't involve Moon Knight, but
Yeah, that's true.
it's definitely in with the current times as to what is going on. So if that's
Mhm.
what they end up doing, then Marvel took it from us. You heard it here first, and they owe us money. Just kidding.
Yeah, residuals, baby.
So another character that we have is uh, a living statue, and no, he's not the living statue, but
Yeah, what was the deal with that guy? He's like a gold statue that Stephen Grant is just talking to.
yeah. So they don't really make a big deal out of that as far as identifying him, and he doesn't talk, he doesn't move, but they credit him actually in the credits as Crawley, which is one of the supporting characters for Moon Knight, named Bertrand Crawley, who's basically a homeless guy who's like Mark Spector's informant. So whether that's actually who this character is, or it's just sort of like an Easter egg, because again, it's just in the credits. They don't really name him, and he doesn't really do anything other than be a statue. It could have just been like, we want to throw this character in here as a nod to the comics, but we're not actually going to use him. Or maybe he'll be an informant. I don't know. We'll see.
I think that's I mean, these like weird cameos and these little pockets of Marvel lore that I don't know anything about, those are so fascinating to me because like I said at the beginning, is just I have such a soft spot for this weird stuff and especially the characters that came out of like the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, sort of that, I grew up late 80s, early 90s. And so a lot of those characters I have that nostalgic feel for, even though they're not considered the classics or the ones that have really stood the test of time. But a lot of them, like Moon Knight, are people that were created out of that era and then they've carried on in some form, even though they may not be, even a C-list character, they may be somewhere below that. I think it's just really enjoyable to read their stories and to see them come to life in live action. Stuff is really exciting because it's like, yeah, I don't know everything about this one. So it's going to be fun. I'll get to be surprised along with everybody else when a new episode hits Disney Plus.
Well, and it's really nice, fan service that they do drop these Easter eggs and hints, whether they pull on the threads or not, just because they could just write the story without these things in it, or it could have just been some random guy. But because it was in the credits, it establishes that link, and so it's just these nice little
Right.
nods to, hey, thank you for being comic book fans, thanks for reading, and here's a little treat for you. If you're
Yeah,
familiar,
that's a lot of fun.
and if you're not, then it's still interesting when you find out, and you're like, oh, that actually was something. Oh, that's kind of cool. Like I definitely don't know everything about comics, and even the characters that I enjoy the most. There's still new things I learn about them all the time because we're talking about like years and years and years of comic history. So there's a lot to
Right.
keep track of. But it's really fun to find out these things as well. And I've learned more things about Moon Knight just doing research for this podcast. So that's been fun as well.
That's honestly a lot of the fun of doing this show
Oh
is
yeah.
just finding out new things, finding out new pockets of comic books that we're interested in. I mean, there are several stories so far that I never would have given a shot or really looked at had it not been for us doing these reviews. So I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else you wanted to
We
say
so
about
there's a couple more
the show? Oh,
characters.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So when Stephen Grant discovers Mark Spector's phone in that like wall safe thing, he realizes that he's been missing a lot of calls from someone named Layla. So that's not the name that's in the comics, but there is a character called Marlene that has the same last name. I think it's pronounced Alrayun. I don't know if that's how they're going to say it in the show, but I might be wrong.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But that's she is an archaeologist and a romantic, girlfriend to Mark Spector. So I'm assuming that's why she's calling, is because she's concerned about him because they have a relationship and he hasn't been answering his phone. But when he's scrolling through all the Laylas that he's missed calls from, there's one that sticks out that's different from all the rest, and it says Duchamp. And again, I assume I'm pronouncing that right because that's how I pronounced it in my head.
Oh.
But this is actually one of his Jean Paul Duchamp, or he calls him Frenchie. And so Frenchie is basically his like mercenary buddy and somebody that, his best friend basically. So he's got the girlfriend, he's got the best friend.
Okay.
So that's another name drop that they might not pull on that thread because they actually don't have an actor assigned to it that we know about as far as the credits and what we know about the show at this point. So we might not see him, but anything's possible. Marvel's proven that they, and Sony have proven that they can keep secrets from us. Um, Even though some people did kind of figure things out, I think for the most part they did a pretty good job of keeping secrets up until the last moment when they started the trailers started showing more information. So it's like
Yeah.
Marvel's good at keeping secrets until right before, and then it's like, hey, secrets left and right, here you go. Don't watch the trailers like a week or two before the movies come out because yeah, spoilers.
Yeah. Yeah. The marketing machine is really out of control, in my opinion. And this is really just a piece of a much larger conversation that we don't really need to get into. But to shorten this from a rant into like a couple sentences, I can't stand how the internet dissects everything before it's out.
Yeah.
And I really would like to experience a story and just be surprised by it. Um, I feel like that's something that we've lost. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's out there for sure. So, one question I did have for you is: do you think
Oh,
that
sure.
this show is within the Marvel Cinematic Universe continuity of what happened in Endgame, and that we've seen in other shows, and especially recently in Hawkeye, where the snap, we see people that have been gone and have come back, and where they were during that period and what happened to them and how it affected their lives. Again, this just being the first episode, we haven't seen, I'm sure, some characters that could certainly feed into this, but it's interesting because Arthur Harrow at one point is talking about, Amit being so great, and if she had been free, she would have prevented Hitler, Nero, and I think a couple others, but he doesn't mention Thanos. So I don't know if it's reading too much into it,
Huh.
but there's nothing in this first episode that seems like it fits within the snap because it's such a big deal in the other shows that it's mentioned at least at some point, but we don't get anything here. And I don't know again if it that would detract from the story, so we left it out, or if this is actually happening in some either different time or different even reality. I mean, who knows if Doctor Strange is gonna mess up the show or not. But do you think
Well,
that it's a part of it, or if it's
if I think about the other TVMA Marvel shows, right, they will drop basically one line of dialogue or something like that. Like Daredevil, for instance, the first season, there's a guy that's like, so you were beaten by one guy and he didn't have a magic hammer or a shield or anything like that. And so that's really all that they address for the most
right?
part, that it takes place in the larger Marvel universe. I think for Moon Knight, I'm kind of okay with that being all that they link it up, just like a line of dialogue here or there, because I feel like the story that they're telling doesn't necessarily need to be connected to the larger universe. Now, of course, if Harrow has Amit blow up half of London or something, then you're going to start asking the questions of like, well, why aren't the Avengers involved? Why don't we have Spider-Man here helping it? Something like that. So I think it's hopefully they're smart enough to limit the scope of it enough that it makes sense that Moon Knight handles this on his own.
Yeah, we're definitely getting to the point where there's so many movies and shows that yeah, you wonder, especially if they're all based in New York, it's like
Right.
okay, they haven't even crossed paths. I mean, when something big is going on, you'd think somebody would notice, some way or another. I mean, if Batman can tell that somebody's being chased by a mugger in Gotham City, which is huge, and he doesn't have any superpowers or super hearing or super speed, and he can
Right.
still, do that, then these characters are pretty aware of what goes on in the city. So New York being a big place, I still feel like they would have crossed paths a lot more than they do. So you either have to, suspend your disbelief and say, well, we're talking about Moon Knight, so we're going to forget about the Avengers for now. But like you said, they've always given us those sort of ties to it, even if they're not like directly involved. They at least make some sort of reference to let you know that it's within the same universe. But they didn't do that here, and I feel like it's more important than it is something they just left out because they want to talk about Moon Knight. And it
Uh yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe it's just too early to tell with
yeah, for
stuff like
sure.
that because we've really only seen one episode that was what, like 40 minutes long. So, oh, that's something I wanted to say that I liked about it though. Hawkeye, all the episodes are too short. 100% of them.
Yeah.
They're like 30 minutes long. It's like just as I'm really starting to get into it, they'll be like, all right, we're going to roll the credits now. Moon Knight felt like an actual normal length for an hour-long drama would be on TV with, commercials or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
That
like,
was
oh, thank
nice.
goodness. Let's actually let the story breathe a little bit. It doesn't just have to go from set piece to set piece to set piece. So that was something I liked about it. I don't know. I don't know that I need it to connect super strongly to the rest of the universe. It would be nice for them to, just have a throwaway line like they did in Daredevil or something like that. But I think that's all they really need to do. Because I don't at this point I don't need more stories that talk about the snap. I think we've had enough movies and or TV series that were follow-ups to that event that I don't think they really need to say much more about it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
at some point they sort of like it will eventually fade because, the stories that came after it dealt with it because it was still fresh and you were kind of
Right.
seeing what happened and how it influenced the stories. But we should get to a certain point where it's like, okay, yes, this was a crazy event and it was traumatic for a lot of people and it really screwed up the world, but
Right.
we started recovering from it. People are back. They figured out whose house what belongs to. They figured out, what to do with the people that were in the airplanes flying when the snap happened, and then there were no airplanes there. No, wait, they didn't talk about that. But anyway, but eventually we get to the point where, society's recovering and things sort of go back to, I don't know, whatever kind of normal there will be for the MCU. So yeah, eventually we'll distance ourselves from that. We don't need to keep referencing it. And that could be very well what this is too, is they're like, you know what, we've done this snap thing. It's time to move on.
Yeah, I mean, well, like WandaVision talked about it and Hawkeye talked about it, and
Captain
I'm
America
fairly certain that
or
Captain America and the Winter Soldier talked about it. Oh, sorry, I said the spoiler title. Um, but I'm sorry, that's just how I think of it now.
yeah, I think it's
Um,
been out long
yeah,
enough.
so all three of those shows talked about it. Has there been a movie that like well, I mean, I guess Infinity War did technically was aftermath of that as well. So it feels like we've really, at least to me, I'm satisfied that we've addressed it enough. The Spider-Man that addressed it too because the movie with Mysterio, they talk about how like they should have graduated high school by now, but they didn't or something because of the snap. So
Yeah,
that was again, I think they've brought it up enough times that I'm ready for them to move on at this point.
agreed. Anything else? That's it for me.
No, I think that's gonna wrap it up for me. Like I said, it's just the first episode, so really this is just kind of our first impressions of it. But I'm excited to see where it goes. Everybody check out the links, all the social media, and keep on subscribing to us on YouTube, giving us 5-star ratings on Spotify and Apple. We've got some kind of exciting ideas coming up. I think we're eventually going to be doing a Ninja Turtles comic, and if we can figure out a way to make it work, I would like to stream us playing the TMNT Cowabunga collection, which is like all the NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis games from yesteryear of Ninja Turtles. That would be kind of a cool treat to put up on the YouTube channel. So, yeah, everybody keep on checking out the content, and thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you. This has been another after show. So stay tuned next time when we come back and we talk about Morbius. We'll do the same sort of thing where we talk about the comic Old Wounds in the episode and then probably dissect the movie in the after show. So that way we try to, limit any spoilers if you're still going to see it. So
Absolutely.
should be a fun time. So thank you very much, and we will catch you next time.
We like
Comics
because they have no